القدس تنادينا القدس تنادينا القدس تنادينا.
فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونزلنا عليك الكتاب تبيانا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة وبشرى للمسلمين. صدق الله العظيم. Surah An-Nahl of the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares, and we sent down the book, yani the Quran, on thee, O Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, that this book might explain all things. That this book might explain all things. And therefore that this book might explain that strangest of all events to occur in the religious history of mankind, and you cannot ignore it. No, not after tonight's lecture. When Banu Israel, who had been expelled from the Holy Land and dispersed in a strangely scattered diaspora, وَقَطَّعْنَاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُمَمٍ, after 2,000 years, Banu Israel returned to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. What is the explanation? We have provided an explanation from the Quran. It is in this book. For those who differ with this explanation, we ask them tonight, give us your explanation from the Quran. When the state of Israel, which was destroyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than 2,000 years ago, now strangely and mysteriously and mystifyingly, a state of Israel is restored in the Holy Land. What is the explanation, we ask? We have explained it from the Quran in this book, Jerusalem in the Quran. If you differ with us, we say, give us your explanation from the book of Allah. This Quran not only provides an explanation of all things, but also provides guidance. How should we respond to this mystifying event of the return of the Jews to the Holy Land and the restoration of the state of Israel in the Holy Land? What is the guidance specific to this in the Quran? That explanation and that guidance have come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as rahmah. Woe unto those who will not reach out and accept that rahmah and thank Him for it. And for those who accept it and apply it in their lives, bushra lahum, good news and glad tidings for them. They will understand what others cannot, and they will succeed when others will not. Brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We praise Allah and we glorify Him this night when we deliver our fourth lecture in Lakemba. It could be the last. Allah knows best. Because we live in a strange world in which the barriers are now being placed for those who teach the deen. We praise Allah and we glorify Him. And we beseech Him this night, most humbly, for His guidance and for His blessings and for His protection. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Someone should have warned me that when you travel by Virgin Air, you must take food with you. So we went to Perth, it's 4 hours, and on our way back we were hungry. So we had Virgin Air food. And so you're lucky you're not going to get 2.5 hours tonight. I was preparing to give you 2.5 hours tonight. So you might have to settle for 1.5 hours. We also have some good news for you tonight, alhamdulillah, because most of you here in Lakemba Arabs from Lebanon, you have from Egypt, you have the Arabic language. I just got the news from New York that this book is now almost halfway translated into Arabic. Only half remains, and they have assured me this is a brother who is the head of the Arabic translation department at the United Nations in Manhattan, who's just retired. And he offered to translate this book into Arabic. He's finished half, and he's assured me by the end of this year, inshallah, he'll finish the whole book. So this book can now reach the Arabic-speaking world. But in the meantime, I would be very happy if you can send this book to those in the Arabic-speaking world, in Palestine in particular, in Egypt, in Jordan, who understand English, so it may reach them without delay. Jerusalem in the Quran is a subject of profound importance, one of the most important subjects of all for Muslims to seek to understand today. And yet, it was a subject which it was almost impossible to understand 50 years ago, until events began to unfold. Now it is easier to understand it. We hope that as a result of this lecture tonight and the lectures we've had before, at least one thing will emerge, and that is we'll all now return to the Book of Allah, to study it seriously, to try to get from the Book of Allah that which explains the world today. The subject begins, of course, with Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was thrown into the fire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him from the fire and declares in Surah Al-Anbiya, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ وَلُوطًا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We saved him, and we delivered him and his nephew Lut alayhi salam, hijrah, to a land in which we had placed blessings for all of mankind. This is the Holy Land, in which is located Jerusalem. Tonight we want to attempt something that we've not done before, not anywhere else in the world, and not in Australia. For the first time we attempt it tonight. We attempt to define the Holy Land. What is the geographical limit of the Holy Land as located in the Quran and the Sunnah? Because we want to understand why is it that Mr. Bush wants to attack Iraq? Why? Why is it that the state of Israel is so hungry to expand territorially? Why? He has taken Ibrahim alayhi salam on a journey from Ur, which is in Babylon, which is close to the mouth of the Euphrates River, where the Euphrates River reaches the sea. And he travels with his family to the Holy Land. But notice the journey. Between the beginning of the journey over here in what is today Iraq, and the end of the journey in what today is called Palestine, between these two areas is a vast desert area. Today you can fly easily. Today you can get into your motor car, and once your tank has gas, you can drive over easily. But if you were traveling with a family with you, and you were using animals, you would need to stop on the way so many times. You need places to sleep, you would need food to eat, you need water to drink. And so travelers would seldom, if ever, attempt to travel directly across the desert from Iraq to Palestine. What Ibrahim alayhi salam did, and the Jews themselves give us this information, is that he traveled northwest along the rivers where there was water and where there were people living and therefore food. Traveled northwest above the desert until he came to the north of Syria, south of Turkey. And when he reached there, then he headed southwest, down into Palestine. In this way, he was able to skirt the desert. When he stopped, this was the Holy Land. And so we know that the Holy Land did not extend all the way to Iraq, to the river Euphrates, because he was already living there. And he had to leave there and travel a long journey and cross the desert from the north. The desert could not comprise the Holy Land. And so the Holy Land has to be on the western side of the desert which separates Iraq from Palestine. So we now have the geographical limits of the Holy Land on its eastern frontier. What are the geographical limits of the Holy Land on its western frontier? To the south is the sea. Musa alayhi salam is raised in a part of Egypt. And tonight we're going to learn which part of Egypt. And he takes Banu Israel across the sea. The river Nile is to the back, the Red Sea is to the front, and he crosses the Red Sea. وَإِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرِ. This is the Red Sea. And then he crosses into Sinai. Not the hospital in Manhattan. No, the desert. And when he crosses into Sinai, then of course he goes up the mountain, Mount Sinai. The Torah is revealed, and he comes down with the stone tablets. And then there occurred the incident with his brother Harun alayhi salam, etc. After that, while they are still in Sinai, now he says, يَا قَوْمِ ادْخُلُوا الْأَرْضَ الْمُقَدَّسَةَ الَّتِي كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. O my people, come on, let us enter the Holy Land. So they're not yet in the Holy Land. Let us enter the Holy Land which Allah gave to you. And so, the western limits of the Holy Land has to be Sinai. Sinai is not a part of the Holy Land. In the Torah, there's a strange thing. It says that this book was written by Musa alayhi salam. That's what it says. But at the end of Genesis, I think Genesis, it says that Musa alayhi salam died and he was buried in Sinai and nobody knows where his grave is. Strange, if he was writing the book. If he was writing the book, how did he write this? That I died and I was buried in Sinai and nobody knows where my grave is. It looks now very clear that there were others who were involved in writing other than Musa alayhi salam, who is now dead. In Sahih Bukhari, we have the same thing repeated. That Musa alayhi salam, when the time of death came, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for permission to enter the Holy Land, but he was not given permission. He could only see the Holy Land. So he climbed up a mountain, and from the top of that mountain he was able to see the Holy Land. And then after that he died without being able to enter the Holy Land. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, I know where he's buried. Yes, I know. The Jews don't know, but I know. I can see his grave now by the side of the red hill. I can see his grave. He's not seeing with these eyes, of course. He's seeing with these eyes internally. So Musa ﷺ is buried in Sinai without being able to enter into the Holy Land, and so Sinai does not constitute a part of the Holy Land. So we've now defined the eastern borders and the western borders, limiting it. To the north, we don't have, maybe tomorrow somebody might be able to bring some evidence to me, which will give us a geographical limit to the north. But at least it couldn't be north of when Ibrahim alayhi salam turned southwards to come down to the Holy Land. It has to be somewhere between the northern point of his journey and his destination when he arrived in Palestine. Somewhere in between is the northern limit. Clearly, the Sea of Galilee has to form a part of it because of the hadith of Gog and Magog. This then would be the geographical boundaries of the Holy Land as given in the Quran. One more ayah remains, which clearly identifies the heart of the Holy Land. So around this heart you have to look for the periphery. Which is the heart? Which is the heart? Which is the heart? Subhanalladhi. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlah. Barakna hawlah. And so ila akhir al-ayah. And so where the masjid was located in Jerusalem is the heart of the Holy Land. And so Jerusalem, the city, is the heart of the Holy Land. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes, instead of referring to the Holy Land, He refers to the city. The city being synonymous with the Holy Land. Where does He do that? Where does He do that? وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. Surah Al-Anbiya. Here the Qarya is mentioned, and the Qarya, meaning the town or the city, is used synonymously with the Holy Land. There are other places in the Quran where the word Qarya is used. وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا أَصْحَابُ الْقَرْيَةِ إِذْ جَاءَهَا الْمُرْسَلُونَ. Surah Yasin. Qarya over here again symbolizes or is a synonym for the Holy Land, because 3 prophets are sent to those people. 3. No people other than Banu Israel, no people ever had 3 prophets being sent to them at the same time. Only Banu Israel continuously have prophets being sent to them. Continuously. So the heart and the center of the Holy Land is Jerusalem. Now then, when we go to the Torah, we find something strange, which explains why Mr. Bush wants to attack Iraq on behalf of Israel, of course. The Torah tells us that the Holy Land extends from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. Why the river of Egypt? Why not the whole of Egypt? Why the river Euphrates? Why not beyond? How did they come to the conclusion that this is the Holy Land? In consequence of which, the state of Israel now declares of itself that it has a mission, a sacred mission, to expand until it encompasses this entire area. from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. To understand the river of Egypt, we have to go to that time when Banu Israel went to Egypt, Yusuf alayhi salam. And they lived in Egypt for more than 400 years. However, something happened in Egypt in consequence of which they were enslaved. I would love to explain that to you, but it'll take half an hour. I can't take half an hour on that. But if you invite me to come back to lecture on the subject Ashura in the Quran, then you'll get that whole story. They were enslaved in Egypt. And after enslavement in Egypt for a certain period of time, the pharaohs were using them for labor. The Egyptian army would always go out of Egypt and attack in order to get slaves. They needed a lot of slave labor for these huge projects of construction in which they were engaged. You couldn't build the pyramids with 10 workmen. No. You needed 100,000 men working for you and pay them nothing. So you needed slaves. And so you had a vast amount of slaves in Egypt. And Banu Israel, when they were enslaved, were also part of this labor force. And so they were dispersed all around Egypt, wherever there were construction projects. In the pyramids, so you have some of Banu Israel up there, but then you have Aswan and Luxor. And you have the city of Ramesses and so on. So Banu Israel are scattered all over Egypt. But when the time came for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take them out of Egypt, listen to the ayah, which I believe most Egyptians themselves do not understand. It is in Surah Yunus. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى وَأَخِيهِ أَن تَبَوَّأَ لِقَوْمِكُمَا بِمِصْرَ بُيُوتًا وَاجْعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ قِبْلَةً وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This is not an easy ayah. And we revealed to Musa alayhi salam and to his brother Harun alayhi salam to establish for Banu Israel in the land of Misr, Today, Misr means Egypt. The two are synonymous. Misr means Egypt. But Allah says to establish for Banu Israel in the land of Misr, establish residence, houses, residence. وَجَعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ قِبْلَةً. And let this location in which you are to establish residence, let this be Qibla. Qibla means a direction to which you must turn. When it is Salat, then Qibla would be Mecca or Jerusalem, when it is Salat. But when it is not Salat, then Qibla would be the direction to which you must turn and therefore to move. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and this is very good strategy, that Banu Israel, who are scattered all over Egypt, must now leave wherever they are in Egypt and head for Misr. And so Misr couldn't be the whole of Egypt. No. In fact, Misr is that part of Egypt which is located between the Red Sea and the River Nile, and which is known as the Eastern Delta. It was in that area that a non-Egyptian people ruled at that time when Yusuf alayhi salam came. They were not Egyptians, they were Hyksos. And so Misr is where Banu Israel were established by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Eastern Delta, between the River Nile and the Red Sea. And therefore they declare, since Allah ordained that they should be brought to this land, this means it is a part of the Holy Land. And so the Holy Land extends from the river of Egypt, meaning the River Nile. Well, then why the River Euphrates? The answer is that after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them to enter, when Musa alayhi salam asked them to enter into the Holy Land which Allah gave to you, this there in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-Ma'idah, يا قوم ادخلوا الأرض المقدسة التي كتب الله لكم إلى آخر الآية. They said, we're not going into this land because there's a powerful people in the land. It's going to be a big fight. We're not fighting. You and your Lord, both of you go and fight. So Allah punished them by banning their entry into the Holy Land for how long? 40 years. 40 years. After 40 years in the wilderness of Sinai, then they were allowed to enter in the Holy Land, and they took control of the Holy Land. And then, of course, the state of Israel was established by Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, and expanded in the time of Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, and it became the ruling state in the world. And I've asked you to go to the Quran and look at the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam and the Queen of Sheba. And in that story you'll see implicit there that the Israel of Sulaiman alayhi salam was the ruling state in the world. And this was the golden age. This was the golden age of the Jews. And then, after the death of Sulaiman alayhi salam, there was the internal conflict in which the Torah was rewritten many times. And tonight I had intended to take you through all of that material, showing you all the changes made in the Torah which are strategically relevant to understanding the world today. But we don't have the time for that tonight. You're going to have to go to my book, The Religion of Abraham and the State of Israel, a view from the Quran, and all of that material there is in that book, and that book is outside. After they had made all the changes in the Torah, they are now committing acts of zulm. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنِ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ. This is the greatest act of zulm, to change the word of Allah with your own hands and declare it is the word of Allah. And so now they are expelled from the Holy Land, an army coming from Babylon. The army destroyed the state of Israel and destroyed the masjid, and now they're taken into Babylon as slaves. But they lived in Babylon for almost 100 years. And because prophets of Allah came to them, many prophets of Allah came to them while they were in Babylon. Many. During those 100 years. And because the divine promise was communicated to them while they were in Babylon. Which promise? The promise which came with the prophet Isaiah, that Allah was going to raise a prophet who would be their prophet, who would be known as Al-Masih, the Messiah, and who, when he comes, would rule the world from the throne of Dawood alayhi salam. The throne of Dawood alayhi salam means the state of Israel. It means Jerusalem. Who would rule the world from Jerusalem with a rule which would be eternal. Eternal meaning that there's nothing to replace it. This promise was communicated to them while they were in Babylon during that 100 years. So they interpreted that Babylon must be a part of the Holy Land. Nothing to do with Ibrahim alayhi salam being born there, but rather to the fact that they lived for 100 years there and prophets of Allah came to them. And so someone rewrote the Torah and put into the Torah that the Holy Land extends from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. That is how we now have this awesome moment in history when the state of Israel is about to wage a big war which will witness a dramatic expansion in its territory, incrementally perhaps, until it eventually takes control of this entire area from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. I want you to go now to the next part of the lecture very rapidly, because I gave this talk last year when I was here, and I also gave this talk at Minto. So we're going to move rapidly now. While they were in Babylon and they got this promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they understood, it's a matter of logical deduction, that if the Messiah is to rule the world from Jerusalem, with a rule which is eternal, the first thing he'd have to do would be to liberate the Holy Land, liberate it, because under Babylonian rule, the second thing he'd have to do would be to bring Banu Israel back to the Holy Land, not as tourists, but to reclaim it as their own. The third thing he'd have to do would be to restore the state of Israel in the Holy Land. And the fourth thing he'd have to do would be to cause the state of Israel to become once again the ruling state in the world. And then the Messiah could rule the world from Jerusalem, and this would be a return of the golden age. Golden age. If you have to leave before the end of the lecture, could you kindly sit on this side, because it really distracts me while I'm lecturing for people to be getting up and leaving. So please just come and sit on this side so I'm not distracted. When the Persian Empire defeated Babylon and liberated the Holy Land and allowed the Jews to return to the Holy Land, Banu Israel, and allowed the masjid to be restored and the state of Israel to be restored, now the Jews were convinced that the Messiah is around the corner. The Messiah is around the corner. And so there's electricity in the air. And precisely at that moment the Messiah appears. Yes, they were expecting, and he came. But when the Messiah did appear, and he declared himself to be the Messiah, they rejected him. Some of them accepted him. فَآمَنَ طَائِفَةٌ مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. But the rest rejected him, particularly the administration, the establishment, the rabbis. Why did they reject him? They said, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ هَذَا, he's a bastard. A bastard cannot be the Messiah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them with the baby of a virgin. But when they saw with only one eye, they failed. One-eyed people always fail the test. One-eyed people, it matters not whether you have a PhD from Islamic University or not, a one-eyed man will always fail the test. So they failed the test. If they were seeing with two eyes, they would have said, no, 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 there's something strange here. Why did she come back with the baby? Nobody knew she was pregnant. She's the most famous girl in all the land, the most virtuous, the most pious. What she should have done was to try to get rid of the baby secretly, if she had committed the sin. But she didn't do that. She came back with the baby in front of her. And she says not a word to defend herself. She just points to the baby. And then the baby spoke, And the baby declared that he was a prophet of Allah, but they rejected it. They said, هَذَا سِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ. This sheer magic. If they were seeing with two eyes, they would have said, no, there's something behind this. We must not rush to judgment. But they declared of her that she had committed this vile deed. وَبِكُفْرِهِمْ وَقَوْلِهِمْ عَلَى مَرْيَمَ بُهْتَانًا عَظِيمًا. In consequence of that, they declared he was a bastard. A bastard cannot be the Messiah. And then when they saw him die on the cross before their very eyes, they saw him die. Now, it is plain and clear he couldn't be the Messiah. Why? He's dead. He's dead. Well, he didn't rule the world from Jerusalem with a rule which is eternal. In fact, at this moment when he died, Jerusalem is under Roman occupation. What they didn't know, and no one knew until the Quran was revealed hundreds of years later, was no. They did not kill him, no. They did not crucify him, no. Allah made it appear to them that that was what happened. What is it that happened? What was it that happened? The Quran explains all things. And so the Quran must explain what happened over there on the cross. There's a chapter of my book, Jerusalem in the Quran, which explains what happened from the Quran. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him up. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. So one day he's coming back. And when he comes back, he's going to rule the world from Jerusalem with a rule which will be eternal. When will that take place? When will he come back? Just look at the Sea of Galilee. When the water runs dry in the Sea of Galilee, that is the time that the Son of Mary will come back. Go to Sahih Muslim and you will find the hadith there about Gog and Magog. When they boasted of what they did to him, وَقَوْلِهِمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ عِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. This is sarcasm. Boasting of what they did to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now declares in Surah An-Nisa, وَإِمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا. Not a single one of them will escape. None. At that time when he returns, before his maut, before he dies, at that time, every single Jew will be forced to accept him as the Messiah. And every single Christian will be forced to accept that he is indeed what the Quran and the Prophet declared that he was, a Nabi, an abandoned Son of God, an abandoned Trinity. Every Christian will have to do that, including the Pope. Including the Pope. Yeah. But when they now declare their faith in Nabi Isa alayhi salam as Al-Masih and as a prophet, too late for them. They now die the most horrible of all deaths. Die knowing that what you held on to as the truth was falsehood. And what you rejected, and you terrorized, and you tyrannized, and you fought against, and you demonized on CNN every day, that was the truth. Even when you declared that Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was a terrorist. No, he was not. He was a prophet of Allah. Now you die the most horrible of all deaths, knowing you're going into the hellfire. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا. Because when you stand for judgment, Nabi Isa alayhi salam gives evidence against you and you go into the hellfire. Who died like that? Firaun. Firaun died like that. When he was underneath the water, this is a very important part of the subject. But nobody talks about it. When he was underneath the water, and he's dying. Now the veils are removed for the eyes. Now you can see. وَبَصَرَ وَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ الْحَدِيدِ. Now you can see. So now he says, now I believe in the God of Banu Israel. While he's underneath the water. Before this, he was arrogantly and obstinately declaring he was God. أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. I am the Lord Most High. Ain't no other God beside me. And that belief, that religion of Musa alayhi salam, that's false. But now when he's down there underneath the water and he's dying, now he declares, now I accept the God of Banu Israel as the true God. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds again in Surah Yunus, Al-an, now Fir'aun, وَقَدْ عَصَيْتَ قَبْلَ, and before this you were in obstinate rebellion and rejection, وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ, and you were oblivious of the truth. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ. This day we've decided to preserve your physical body, your badan. فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ. This day we have decided to preserve your physical body. لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً, so that your physical body, when it reappears in history, when it is discovered, and that happened when? At the end of the 19th century, 1897, somewhere around there. لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً, that your physical body, when it is rediscovered, would be a sign of all signs now for a people to come after you. That since they lived the way you lived, they will now die the way you died. Since they lived the way you lived, they'll now die the way you died. And so the discovery of the body of Fir'aun is the beginning of the countdown. The last and the final countdown. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. When the body of Fir'aun is discovered, now the final countdown of the last age begins. And Banu Israel will now be brought back to the Holy Land. And it will culminate in their dying the most horrible of all deaths, the death of Fir'aun. After they returned to the Holy Land, and they committed these awesome deeds of killing the prophets of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made this promise that this is how you're going to die. Then they were expelled. The first time was a Babylonian army. The second time was a Roman army. But this time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expelled them, listen what he said. He said, وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. If you return with your fasad, we will return with our punishment. Why? This is the Holy Land. And only they can inherit this Holy Land who fulfill certain conditions. What are the conditions of inheritance of the Holy Land? Security Council of the UN doesn't know. No. What are the conditions? What are the conditions for inheritance of the Holy Land? Located in the Quran. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا أَنَّ الْأَرْض يعني الْأَرْض الْمُقَدَّسَةِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. You have to be the servant of Allah, and you have to be righteous in your conduct in order for you to inherit the Holy Land. Whenever you change the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam and rewrite it, in my book, The Religion of Abraham and the State of Israel, will tell you of all the changes that they have made. And now your conduct is no longer righteous, it's wicked. Wicked. You drive your people out of their homes for no just cause. إِلَّا أَن يَقُولُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ. That's the only reason why they're driven out of their homes. When you do that, you violate the conditions of inheritance of the Holy Land. And so Allah throws you out. Every time you do that, He throws you out. And if you come back after this, and you do it again as they have done it, He says, I'll throw you out again. And so there's a big event waiting to occur in history, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish Banu Israel for the third and last time with an army. The first time, Babylonian army. The second time, the Roman army. The third and the last time, a Muslim army. When you see the black flags coming from the direction of Khurasan, go and join that army. Even if you have to crawl over ice. You want to know who is the true guide and leader of the Muslims? Find out whether he'll quote this hadith. If he never quotes this hadith, watch him. When you see the black flags coming from the direction of Khurasan, go and join that army, even if you have to crawl over ice. Because no one will be able to stop that army until it reaches Jerusalem. But someone changed the Torah. The Torah says today that righteousness is not a condition for inheritance of the Holy Land. No. It says, it is not because of righteousness that the Lord your God has given you this good land to inherit it. For you are a stiff-necked people. You don't believe me? Go to this book, you will find it. And so, the land was given to the Jews unconditionally, according to the Torah. According to the Quran, these are the conditions. You must be the servant of Allah, and therefore following the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who appointed Ibrahim alayhi salam as your imam. Inni ja'iluka linnasi imama. And number two, you must be righteous in your conduct. But the Torah says no. The land was given to the Jews unconditionally. And so whether they follow the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam or not, it is still their land. Whether they're righteous in their conduct or they're wicked, it is still their land. That's a lie. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now expels them from the Holy Land with a Roman army, breaks them up into bits and pieces and scatters them all over the world. وَقَطَعْنَاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُمَمٍ. And then, this is a very important part of the subject. He who is Arhamur Rahimin, He still opens the possibility for them to earn His mercy. عَسَى رَبُّكُمْ أَن يَرْحَمَكُمْ. عَسَى رَبُّكُمْ أَن يَرْحَمَكُمْ. It is still possible that your Rabb can have mercy on you. How? At the end of Surah Al-A'raf, when that Nabi comes who is An-Nabi Al-Ummi, if you accept him and believe in him and follow him and assist him and honor him and respect him, then Allah will have mercy on you. Who is that Nabi? Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. The last. This is the only door to mercy. If you do not accept him, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will unleash upon you the worst punishment of all in all of history. And so when the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam arrived in Medina, I have said this many times, it was a moment in history so awesomely important that it was as though time stood still. And all the heavens are watching, all the Anbiya alayhim salam are watching. What's going to happen? During the first 17 months in Medina, we mentioned it to you already, the Prophet ﷺ did several things to impress upon Banu Israel the validity of his credentials that he was indeed a true prophet of Allah. Number one, he upheld the Sharia in the Torah by performing his salat in the direction of that Qibla, the Qibla in the Torah, Jerusalem. And therefore here is a prophet following the Sharia of Banu Israel. It was difficult for an Arab to do that in Medina, because for an Arab to turn to Jerusalem in salat, his back is turned towards the Kaaba. And for thousands of years, the Arabs had venerated this Baytul Atiq, even when it was filled with idols. The second thing that he did was to fast with the Jews, Saum, on the days when they fasted, and in accordance with the law of fasting in the Sharia of the Torah, which was from sunset to sunset, on dispersed days of the year. No food, no drink, and you couldn't go to your wives, and that was real difficult for us. Real difficult for us. Some of us used to be cheating. We used to be going to our wives in the night time when we were supposed to be staying away from them. And then he did a third thing. What was that third thing? A case was brought to him, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, by the Jews. Someone who committed adultery. They wanted to test him. And the test fell back on their faces. They wanted to test him. Oh Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, what should we do? Here's a case of adultery for a zina. And he ordered rajam, stoning to death. No, 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 that is not a law. How can you do that? He said, well, is it not there in your books? Bring your book. So they had to bring the Torah. But Abdullah bin Salam, who was their rabbi, had become a Muslim. And he's standing there, the rabbi, who is now a Muslim. So he said, read. The Prophet said, read. And they're now reading. But when they came to the part about stoning to death in the Torah, they put their hand on it, blocked it. So Abdullah bin Salam, he says, raise your hand and read. And they had to read. There it was, stoning to death. That is the punishment for adultery in the Sharia of the Torah. So he now enforced the law of punishment for adultery, which was in the Torah, which they themselves were not enforcing, to impress upon them the validity of his claim that he is indeed a true prophet of Allah. There may be other things that he did, but I have not as yet discovered it. When I wrote the book, Jerusalem in the Quran, at that time I didn't realize about this stoning to death during those 17 months. Now I realize it, but it's not in the book. When I rewrite the book, inshallah, then we can put it in. After 17 months in Medina, it now became plain and clear that Banu Israel had rejected Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam as a prophet and rejected the Quran as the word of Allah. And they were now conspiring to destroy Islam, and to get that conspiracy, you've got to go to the books of Sirah. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acts. It is Shaban, second Shaban in Medina. He acts. He changes the Qibla. This is called Naskh. Ma nansakh min ayatin aw nunsiha na'ti bi khayrin minha aw mithliha. We do not cancel or abrogate any provision of the Sharia, any ayah, but that we replace it with that which is better or similar. Didn't say different, did he? No. He said better or similar. He didn't say different. So now that provision of the Sharia is cancelled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jerusalem is no longer the Qibla. The new Qibla is the Kaaba. And so that is mansukh, it is cancelled. In the same Shaban, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends them a second revelation. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ. Oh, when this revelation came down, there were lots of smiles in Medina. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ رَفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ لَهُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. It is now halal for you in the nights of fasting to go to your wives. They are your garments, you are their garments, you and your garments are inseparable. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Allah knows what you used to be doing secretly. Oh yes, He knows. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah has turned towards you mercifully. وَعَفَى عَنْكُمْ. Allah has forgiven you, even though you have not as yet confessed. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُهُنَّ. And so now embrace them, your wives. But when you embrace them, وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. So now go and search for that which Allah has written for you. So Allah does the writing. How many children you will have, and when you will have the children, Allah does the writing. So now you must not attempt to take over from Allah and do the writing yourself and follow the American Sunnah. American Sunnah, one boy, one girl, 2 children. وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا. Eat and drink. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. Eat and drink until you are able to distinguish the whiteness of the dawn from the darkness of the night. ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. Now you will begin the fast and continue the fast until night time. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم. You must now fast for the whole of the month of Ramadan. So a new Sharia comes down. And this Sharia abrogates the previous one. So that one in the Torah is now mansukh, abrogated, cancelled. This one now has operational validity. Shortly after this, I do not know how long after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down a third revelation. And in this third revelation, He abrogates the law for the punishment for adultery, which is in the Torah. That law in the Torah is now mansukh, because this revelation now comes down. You have a new law for the punishment for adultery, for zina. And nowhere in the Quran has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever made a distinction between the zina of someone who is married and the zina of someone who is unmarried. Nowhere in the Quran has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever made that distinction in zina. Nowhere has the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam ever made a distinction in zina between the one who is married and the one who is unmarried. That distinction did not come from Allah and His Messenger. It came from others. But from Allah and His Messenger, that law is now mansukh. And this is the new law, a public beating, 100 lashes. And so now, the door to mercy is closed for Banu Israel. The door to mercy is closed. Allah shuts it. And now comes down the ayah, وَإِذْ تَأْذَنَ رَبُّكَ لَيَبْعَثَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِلَىٰ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ مَنْ يَسُومُهُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. And your Lord has now announced that he's now going to raise against them those who will inflict upon them until the last day the worst possible punishment. Who are they that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will now raise? The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ came into the masjid, found his companions talking. He asked, what are you talking about? They said, we're talking about the signs of the last day. He said, the last day would not come until, and he mentioned 10. Number 1, Dajjal. Number 2, Gog and Magog. Number 3, the return of the son of Maryam. Number 4, Dukhan or smoke. Number 5, Dabbatul Ard. And whenever Allah and His Messenger uses the word Ard in connection with the last stage, almost always it is Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. And so Dabbatul Ard is almost certain to be Dabbatul Ardil Muqaddasa, a beast to come out of the Holy Land. Number 6, that the sun would rise from the west. On this one, I'm not going to say anything. The sun rising from the west. I wasn't going to say anything. Number 7, 8, and 9, 3 movements of the earth, 3 landslides, the earth opening and swallowing what it swallows, 1 in the east, 1 in the west, and the 3rd one in Arabia, which is the one that will confirm that this is the Imam al-Mahdi. And number 10, a fire will come out of Yemen and will drive people to their place of assembly, which is Arafat. These are the 10 major signs. Apart from these 10 major signs, there are numerous minor signs. Numerous. We don't have the time to mention them, but you'll find in my book, One Jamaat, One Amir, at the beginning, there's a chapter entitled The Age of Fitan. I think I need to rewrite that chapter and expand it now. But in that chapter, The Age of Fitan, you'll see a number of the signs which are not in the 10 major signs. Now, what are those who are now going to be raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Clearly, number 1 and most important of all is Dajjal. Clearly, most important of all is Dajjal. And tonight we're going to spend a little time on Dajjal. It's going to be Gog and Magog. And since we already dealt with the subject on the subject of Imam al-Mahdi and the return of the Khilafah, we need not go back to Gog and Magog. And number 3, Dabbatul Ard. They're now going to be raised against Banu Israel and inflict upon Banu Israel until the last day the worst possible punishment. Who is Dajjal? I want to urge you to study this subject with great care. But when you want to study the subject of Dajjal, it isn't like studying physics. You must turn the heart to Allah. Cleanse and purify the heart. Make 2 rakat nafis salat, for example. And beg Him with tears in your eyes, "Oh Allah, kindly guide me that I may understand this subject. When you make me understand it, it will be so easy for me. But if you do not open the veils, not even with a PhD will I be able to understand the subject of Dajjal." This is my advice to you before I leave you. When they boasted of what they did to the true Messiah, they rejected him. He can't be the Messiah because he's a bastard, wa na'udhu billah min hadha, etc. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to this. He created Dajjal, who is a person, not a system, a person. And endowed Dajjal with awesome power, awesome versatility, and a PhD in deception. When Dajjal is released into the world, it would be after the door to mercy is closed to Banu Israel. Only then would he be released into the world. And now with the change in Qibla, we know the door to mercy is now closed. When Dajjal is released into the world, his basic function is to impersonate the Messiah. This is why he's known as Al-Masih al-Dajjal. If he is to impersonate the Messiah and convince the Jews that he is indeed the Messiah, then he'd have to rule the world from Jerusalem with what would appear to be the end of history, eternal rule. In order for him to do that, logical deduction, number one, he'd have to liberate the Holy Land of non-Jewish rule. Number two, he'd have to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land, not as tourists, but to reclaim the land as theirs. Number three, he'd have to restore a state of Israel in the Holy Land and get the Jews to believe that this is the Israel of Nabi Dawood alayhi salam and Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam. Of course it would not be. But since they only see with one eye, they're deceived. And number four, which has not as yet happened, which is about to happen. I suggested to you when I came last December that maybe this is going to take place within the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe even less than that. But remember, this is only guesswork on my part. I can be wrong. What I know for certain, it's going to be soon. That I know. That he has to cause the state of Israel to become the ruling state in the world, and that's where I want to spend some time tonight. So let's get quickly with the lecture. When Dajjal is released, therefore, this is what Dajjal will have to do. Eventually rule the world from Jerusalem with what would appear to be eternal rule. And Banu Israel then would be taken on a ride. And it will be the last ride on which they'll ever go. Yeah? This will be the most fantastic act of deception ever recorded in history. This one. So we are living in fascinating times if we'll only take a little time to study the book of Allah and to study the word of the Prophet ﷺ with 2 eyes, not with one. When Dajjal is released, said the Prophet ﷺ, he will live on earth for 40 days, one day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week, and the rest of his days like your days. Sahih Muslim. This hadith is so important that we got an artist in Malaysia to take this hadith and design the cover of this book with 3 circles there. You can see the 3 circles. One day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week. And the rest of his days will be like your days. When his day is like our day, he's living in our dimension of time. Anybody differs with that? When he's living in our dimension of time, we'll be able to see him. The Prophet ﷺ described him. He'll be a Jew, be a young man, powerfully built, curly hair. Of course, we understand the 2 eyes. The left eye symbolizes external vision. The right eye, which is blind, symbolizes internal blindness. But if you differ with me, that's your privilege. That's your privilege. When Dajjal is released and his day is like our day, where would he be on earth? Of course, he has to be in Jerusalem, ruling the world from Jerusalem. And the Jews are now absolutely convinced this is the Messiah. This is the man. That one on the cross was false. This is the man. Why? Because the Jews have been ruling the world. Because the golden age has come back. And therefore this must be the true Messiah. But when he comes into our day, he's going to only live for about 37 days. Or maybe less than that, depending upon a day like a year, a day like a month, a day like a week. The question is, where would he be when he's released on earth in a day which is like a year? Where would he be on earth when his day is like a month, and where would he be on earth when his day is like a week? We went to the hadith of Tamim al-Dari. Let's go back one more time very quickly. It is there in Sahih Muslim. Tamim al-Dari is a Christian who takes the Shahada, became a Muslim in Medina. He came to the Prophet ﷺ and narrated something. The Prophet ﷺ asked the people to sit down in the masjid. He said, Tamim al-Dari came to me and told me something about Dajjal which confirms what I've been saying to you. So this is true. This is true. The rest comes now from the lips of the Blessed Prophet ﷺ. He said that Tamim ad-Dari and some of his companions, about 30, 40 of them, went on board a ship. And then the ship was tossed in the waves, so a storm, for a whole month, until they reached land. If you're on the western side of Arabia, because that's where Tamim ad-Dari is, the western side of Arabia, and you get on board a ship, the ship has to be either in the Red Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. Although somebody in Cape Town told me the Atlantic Ocean. Either the Red Sea or the Mediterranean Sea. We eliminate the Red Sea because it's too narrow. If a storm is blowing for a whole month, the ship would not remain for a whole month before reaching land, so we left it only in the Mediterranean Sea. After 1 month they reach an island. The hadith does not tell us how they knew it was an island. They got on shore, and there they were confronted by a very hairy beast. A very hairy beast. Don't fall asleep, huh? A very hairy beast. So much hair that you can hardly tell which side is head and which side is tail. And the beast now speaks to them. Says, I am Jassasa. Jassasa, wala tajassasu, Surah Al-Hujurat, do not spy. We always tell them that. But they like the check that comes from the CIA and the FBI. They love that check. Oh yes, but one day the earth will speak and they will be exposed. Do not spy. This is Jassasa, spy. So an island of people who have a PhD in spying and espionage, intelligence work. And then Jassasa directs them to a monastery. And they go hurriedly to the monastery because they want to get away from Jassasa. When they reach there, they find this powerful man, young man, powerfully built, curly hair, but nothing about his eyes in the hadith. And he's in chains. His hands are chained to his neck, his feet are chained with nicest way. If any robbers come to rob you and you catch hold, it's the best way to tie them up. And now, this man starts to question them. Very interesting questions. We don't have the time to go through those questions, but we have them in this book here. And then after the questioning is over, the man says, I am Dajjal. I am Dajjal. So up to that moment, in Medina, after the Hijrah, Dajjal had not as yet been released. Okay? He says, I am Dajjal. And when I am released, I will enter every town and every city. But he didn't mention villages. No. So now we know from this hadith that when Dajjal is released and launches his mission to impersonate the Messiah, and therefore to ultimately rule the world from Jerusalem, it is from this island that he must launch his attack. And the question that we ask is, which island is it? We give an answer, but you don't have to agree with us. Yes, you don't have to agree. This is our answer. But if you differ with us, then you should point out to us which is the correct answer. You cannot simply differ with me for fun and games. No, that's not serious. If you differ with me, you must point out to me which island it is. My answer is the island of Britain. And now I'm beginning to understand history, because I'm a student of international relations. Britain suddenly and mysteriously becomes the ruling state in the world. Yes. The Russians had contempt for the British. The French had more than contempt for the British. Napoleon referred to them as a nation of shopkeepers. But this Britain, a little island off the coast of Europe, which never walked on the stage of history, this Britain suddenly and mysteriously and mystifyingly and bafflingly, this Britain becomes the ruling state in the world. It could not have happened by accident. What is the explanation? This is my explanation. This is Dajjal at work. If you have another explanation, I want to hear it. The scientific and technological revolution emerges from Britain. We don't have the time to go through it. But if you are young, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 tonight, son and daughter, I have this homework to give to you. Go and study the scientific and technological revolution. Study it back to front and seek to understand what is happening and link the scientific and technological revolution to the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ pertaining to Dajjal. Dajjal will step into the ocean and the water will reach him up to his knee. Huh? If they want to wait for a very tall man who one day will step into the ocean, and when he steps into the Atlantic Ocean, the water will reach him up to his knee, well, we should allow them to wait for that to happen. Okay? But when TW-800 crashed into the ocean off the coast of Long Island, when Egypt Air 900 crashed off the coast of Boston, notice that these aircraft took off from New York. Did you notice that? Why did it happen from an aircraft that took off from New York? Because New York is the center of news of the world today. All the major news agencies have their headquarters in New York. That's why the aircraft had to take off from New York, so that this event will get maximum publicity, which is why the aircraft had to hit the 2 World Trade Center towers in New York. If you had hit the Petronas towers in Kuala Lumpur, you ain't going to get all that publicity. If you hit some buildings in Sydney Harbour, you're not going to get that publicity. So you've got to hit a target in New York to get the maximum publicity. When these aircraft fell into the ocean, did you notice what happened? A display, a dazzling display of modern technology. That the Americans were able to go down to the bottom of the ocean and pick up the pieces of this aircraft and then reassemble the aircraft, so that they had 90-something% of the aircraft recovered and reassembled. If that was not stepping into the ocean with the water reaching you to your knee, well, what is it? So I want you to go and study the scientific and technological revolution, which emerges from Britain. Study it like the back of your hand and seek to relate it to the ahadith and Dajjal. Britain becomes the ruling state in the world. And Britain becomes the ruling state not only on the basis of military power, the scientific and technological revolution being applied to military science, military power, military technology. Britain becomes the ruling state in the world also because Britain has control over money of the world, the Bank of England. And Britain rules the world for a day which is like a year. It is during that time that you had the Balfour Declaration, that it is the intention of the British government to work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in the Holy Land. (1917). We explained to you in the lecture of Imam al-Mahdi and the return of the Khilafah, the deal with the Jews. Then came 1919, and what happened? The British army defeats the Turkish army, liberates the Holy Land. Britain now assumes control over the Holy Land on a mandate conferred by the League of Nations. Between 1919 and 1948, we have Britain ruling over the Holy Land and opening the doors for the Jews to return. Prior to this, the Ottoman Islamic State never allowed the Jews to return. They can come back as tourists, But apart from the small Jewish community which is allowed to live in Jerusalem, the Jews cannot come back to reclaim the Holy Land. In 1948, it is Britain which presides over the birth of the State of Israel. Power being transferred in the night mysteriously without any legal instrument of transfer, and the State of Israel is born. This is the first time in European history that there is a transfer of power from a colonizer to a new state after decolonization without a legal transfer of power. First time the State of Israel is born this way. And so my answer is the island of Britain is the island of Tamim-ud-Dari. This is my answer. Remember, you don't have to agree with me. If you differ with me, however, you should correct me and tell me which is the correct island. When you do so, you must provide the evidence which supports you. And then came the transfer of power from Britain to the United States. In order for that transfer of power to take place from Britain to the United States, we not only had to demonstrate the superior military power of the United States, which took place in the First World War, while Britain was losing the war, but secondly, that the United States now has control over money. And so the Bank of England goes into the background, and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank now assume the position of controlling the world of money. When the United States became the ruling state in the world, again, that was strange, because who are these? These are a bunch of people who migrated from a number of European countries to form a new country out there across the ocean, very far away. And that United States of America should now become the ruling state in the world, replacing Britain, is something also extremely strange, difficult to explain, except with the ahadith on Dajjal. Now, while the United States of America is the ruling state in the world, we notice this strange and mysterious relationship with Israel. That the United States is defying all kind of rationality to feed Israel, to support Israel, to cause Israel to become stronger, to transfer military technology to Israel, some through the back door, some through the front door. And so Israel grows while the United States is the ruling state in the world, until Israel becomes a nuclear power and a thermonuclear power. Saddam Hussein in Iraq is not allowed to have any weapons of mass destruction. No. And the Australian government, following faithfully behind Uncle Sam, points out it's wrong. It is morally wrong to have weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. But the Australian government, of course, doesn't know. Somebody should tell the Australian government about all the weapons of mass destruction that the State of Israel has, that the Australian government wouldn't talk about. I hope they're not offended by facts. And if we're not allowed to speak facts, what is there other than this to talk about? The United States of America now feeds and builds the baby until Israel becomes a powerful state, on par with other nuclear power states. And now the time has come for the United States to deliver to Israel the status of being the ruling state in the world. And it is here we want to pause now for some microanalysis. This is where we are located now in history. This is where we should be focusing our attention, not slandering each other and fighting over chicken feed, but focusing your attention on the moment in history in which we are located. This is the moment of great drama, and blessed are those who have a light with which to see, to understand what is happening in the world. When Israel becomes the ruling state in the world, the most surprised man in the universe would be a man named Yasser Arafat. Yeah. He will be the most surprised of all in the whole universe. But you in Lakemba would not be surprised. No. So maybe somebody could send him a copy of this book. Huh? In order for Israel to replace the United States as the ruling state in the world, first of all, a day which is like a month has to come to an end. I have not calculated how long is a day which is like a month, but maybe you have the time to do that, and one of you may take up this research. I am offering a guess that we are now close to the end of a day which is like a month. If Israel is to replace the United States as the new ruling state in the world, and to rule the world for a day which is like a week, then something has to happen to diminish American power. American military power does not appear to have anything in the world which can challenge it. And so I'm not looking at American military power, but I'm looking at the American economy. That if you can attack the American economy and cause it to collapse, then that will impact upon America's capacity to fight war. And in the American economy, by far the most vulnerable part of the economy is the dollar. When we speak on the subject of Islam and the international monetary system, inshallah, on Wednesday night, and remember, that is the most important lecture of all that I'll be delivering this time. So please ask your friends and your teachers and so on to come to that lecture. When the American dollar is attacked, and the American dollar collapses, and you will see on Wednesday night how easy it is for it to happen, then the whole world of paper money is going to collapse with it. The whole world of paper money will collapse with it. And when paper money collapses, then money is going to be electronic impulses in machines, in banks. Prepare yourself for this now. You can't see money anymore. No. You can't see money anymore. You can't touch money anymore. Money will now become invisible. Money will now become intangible. Money is now electronic impulses in mindless machines in banks. And that would be the most fabulous victory of all for the Jew in his entire inglorious history. That one. And that is around the corner. But in order for Israel to become the ruling state in the world, Israel also has to wage a big war which will establish its credentials as the supreme military power in the world. It has to be a war with dazzling display of military technology, surpassing Uncle Sam. So Israel has to have something secret that even the Americans don't know about. When that war takes place, obviously Dajjal has to expand the territory of the state incrementally. Incrementally means piece by piece, until eventually he's able to establish rule over the territory from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. If you want to take over the land in the river of Euphrates area, you've got to soften up Iraq, make Iraq soft. So you begin by destroying Iraq's nuclear capacity. That was 1980. Secondly, you have the Gulf War, in which you set a trap for Saddam Hussein, and he walks into the trap. And when he walks into the trap, you can now unleash this war upon him, which will destroy Iraq militarily. Iraq's army is destroyed. Iraq's air force is destroyed. And Iraq's economy is now dismantled through UN economic sanctions until Iraq is relegated back to the old Stone Age. Iraq poses no threat to anyone now. No threat at all. So this hullabaloo about weapons of mass destruction, actually they're scratching their heads to come up with some kind of an excuse. Why to attack Iraq? Don't you have any idea? Come, let me hear now. You give me some idea, why should we attack Iraq? Huh? So then Shaitan whispers, well, why don't you say weapons of mass destruction? It's good drama from Hollywood. Israel has to wage this big war which will take her all the way to Iraq, not Iran. No, Israel I don't think will attack Iran, but Iraq. Israel has to seize the oil of the Middle East, the Saudi oil, the Iraqi oil, the Kuwaiti oil. And when Israel seizes that oil, the UN Security Council passes resolutions, of course. But will they send any troops? No. The United States and Britain, will they send any troops? No. And so Europe will be stuck. Why do you think the Europeans are making so much noise now? Because the Europeans realize they've been deceived by Britain and the United States. That's why they're now up in arms. Europe and Japan will now be like this. Israel will have them by the throat because Israel controls the oil. And in the process, it enhances Israel's credentials to be recognized now as a ruling state in the world. But Israel cannot become the ruling state in the world if this war is very plain and clear to everyone in the world as a war of aggression. So at Minto, I explained why Mr. Bush has to attack Iraq. It is on behalf of Israel that after Israel has committed sufficient atrocities against the Palestinian people, and of course Al Jazeera, naturally, because we accept Al Jazeera as ours. Al Jazeera is ours. We one-eyed people. Al Jazeera is ours. Al Jazeera will tell us everything that the other television stations are not telling us. Therefore, Al Jazeera is ours. So when Al Jazeera says it has an interview with Osama bin Laden, all these one-eyed people will say, yes, that's the truth. Al Jazeera is speaking the truth. Well, guess who has established Al Jazeera? Guess who has funded Al Jazeera? That's your homework. When the news has spread all over and all the Arabs are inflamed and enraged, boiling point, and all the pro-American regimes in the Arab world are shaking and shivering. Mubarak in Egypt, Fahad in his hospital bed, Abdullah in Jordan, Sheikh Sabah in Kuwait, shaking and shivering with fear because their people hate them because of what is happening in the Holy Land. When it has reached boiling point, only then would Israel say to Mr. Bush, now you can attack. Mr. Bush can't attack until Israel gives him permission to attack. Israel now gives permission for Bush to attack Iraq. When Bush attacks Iraq, it is not because Iraq poses any threat to anyone. No. There are two reasons for the attack on Iraq. Number one, so you can replace a Sunni regime with now a new Shia regime, so you can expand the Shia world of Iran to encompass Iraq as well. But secondly, when Bush attacks Iraq, then the masses of the Arabs must now spill out into the streets in massive demonstrations against their regimes. The way that Bhutto was brought down. And if you think that Bhutto was brought down only by Pakistani people demonstrating, you're living in Disneyland. The way that the Shah of Iran was brought down, same thing applies. They got the experience. They know it now, how to do it. And so now you see the people going out into the streets and demonstrating. And one or more of these regimes are going to fall. Which one is most likely to fall first? Jordan. That's why Abdullah has his suitcases already packed. When any of these regimes fall, and is replaced by an anti-American, anti-Israeli and pro-Islamic regime, it is then that CNN will really come alive. It is then that the media will really come alive. A dazzling display of the power of the media to impress upon mankind around the world that the whole world of Islam is now rising up. And these regimes in the Muslim world are going to fall like dominoes now. And the world of Islam is on the go. It's going to be real good drama, you know. Real good drama. And the Jews are now in very grave danger. Muslims are going to cut their throats now. They have to do something. I told you Dajjal has a PhD in deception. Yeah. So now Israel will be expected to do something. The whole world is waiting. What are you going to do? You've got to do something. Or the Muslims are going to cut your throat. And so Israel will say, well, we've got to do something. We've got to launch a preemptive strike. Because mankind is waiting on Israel to do something. Because mankind doesn't know. Israel already planned everything in advance. This so-called preemptive strike is in fact a lightning strike, a dazzling display of military power, the likes of which mankind has never seen. And before you know what's happening, Israel has taken control of this region, taken control of the oil. And it would not appear to the world that it was a war of aggression, but rather the Jews were simply trying to defend themselves. But Israel cannot become the ruling state in the world when you have a United Nations in New York, can you? Can you? No. Can you shift the United Nations from New York to Jerusalem? No. 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 Not even Dajjal could accomplish that one. So what's going to happen then? Simple. In the same way that when the United States refused to enter into the League of Nations, the League of Nations eventually collapsed. So too, all that the United States Senate and House of Representatives, the Congress, has to do is to pass a resolution demanding the withdrawal of the United States from the United Nations. And who controls the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives? The Jews. They control it. So the United States withdraws from the United Nations. You think that's impossible? No. And when the United States withdraws from the United Nations, can the United Nations remain in New York? No. Got to pull out. Can't stay in Uncle Sam's country anymore. Huh? That's the end of the UN. Won't be relocated anywhere else in the world. There will be no UN after that. What about the World Bank and the IMF? Israel cannot be the ruling state in the world when the World Bank and the IMF remain the premier economic institutions in the world for monetary policy. And so the world will have to have a new international monetary system. Yes. And that is going to be our lecture on Wednesday night. The World Bank collapses, the IMF collapses, and something else now replaces it, which is now located in Jerusalem. So Israel becomes the ruling state in the world. This is where I want you to concentrate your thought, on this part of the subject. The passage from the United States to Israel, this passage, in which this one replaces this one as the ruling state in the world. This is where you must do your homework. When Israel becomes the ruling state in the world, of course, the Jews will now be absolutely convinced the golden age has come back, we're ruling the world. This is the Messiah. Then after Israel has ruled the world for a day, which is like a week, at that time, of course, Dajjal will appear now in a day which is like our day, so we'd see him in person. That is the time when the water will be dry in the Sea of Galilee. It is at that time that the Imam emerges, Imam al-Mahdi. It is at that time that Dajjal attacks. It is at that time that the confrontation takes place in Damascus. Dajjal is outside, the Imam is inside. It is at that time that when Dajjal is ready for the kill, as Fir'aun was ready for the kill. He had Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel there cornered. In front is the sea. Now just to move in, history repeats itself. The Jews have the Imam cornered. History is about to repeat itself. At that time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened. He told Musa alayhi salam, strike the water. Divine intervention. And this time, what happens? The son of Mary comes down at that moment, with his hands resting on the wings of two angels. Divine intervention. The true Messiah will now kill the false Messiah. And then Gog and Magog will be destroyed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When that happens, it is now that the Muslim army will emerge out of Khurasan. When you see the black flags coming from the direction of Khurasan, go and join that army. Well, then what do we do in the meantime? Just sit down and wait until Imam al-Mahdi comes? No. No. The jihad to liberate the Holy Land has already started. The jihad to liberate the land of Khurasan is already in force. When a jihad is in force, it is fard ayn, not fard kifaya, to participate in the jihad. When the leaders of the jihad demand of you to come and fight with them in person, then you must leave and go. But the leaders of the jihad are not asking you to leave Australia now. Tomorrow they will do. What they're asking for you now is to support the jihad to liberate the Holy Land. Support it with your money. Support it by sending weapons. Support it by standing up and declaring your support for it, even if you have to lose your job. That's what they're asking of you. So when you see the black flags coming from the direction of Khurasan, go and join that army. Even if you have to crawl over ice, because no one will be able to stop that army until it reaches Jerusalem. And so a Muslim army now liberates the Holy Land. And Allah's promise is fulfilled. وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. If you return with your fasad, we will return with our punishment. A Muslim army destroys the state of Israel. And the Islamic State is now established in replacement of this phony state. That Islamic State is presided over by the son of Mary and the Imam. That Islamic State now becomes the ruling state in the world, and no one can stop that, not even the government of Australia. No one can stop that. If you are 17 or 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 or 22 years of age tonight, my son or my daughter, I want this in your heart tonight. No one can stop that. Islam is going to rule the world tomorrow. So don't give up. فَلَا تَهِنُوا وَتَدْعُوا إِلَى السَّلْمِ وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ وَاللَّهُ مَعَكُمْ وَلَنْ يَتِرَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Do not despair. Do not give up. Do not throw in the towel, when you should rather be making the effort to build that power with which you will have the upper hand. You will have the upper hand. And in that struggle, remember, Allah is with you, not with them. And Allah will never allow your effort to be in vain. When Islam rules the world from Jerusalem, then the truth of Islam will be validated before mankind. There will be no religion in the world other than Islam. Christianity is gone because he breaks the cross. Judaism is gone because he kills the swine. And there is only one true religion in the world. So jizya is now abolished because there are no more Ahlul Kitab. Imam al-Mahdi will live for only 7 years and die. But Isa alayhi salam will live for 40 years. He will get married, he'll have children, and then he'll die. And you will perform the Salatul Janazah over his body. And then, said the Prophet ﷺ, he'll be buried next to me in Medina. This is the amount of details that we have. I ask you to read this book very carefully. This is the first and only book on the subject so far. Read this book very carefully. At the back of this book is my email address. If you differ with me, sure, that's your privilege. But then write to me and tell me where I'm wrong and tell me what is right. This book here, try to get this book into the hands of the Australian people, the non-Muslims. It's a very small booklet. A Muslim response to the attack on America. It is outside. Get it and give it to those who are not Muslims. Tomorrow night we meet at Rooty Hill for an expanded version of the Muslim village. What is the Muslim village? How should it be established? And then on Wednesday night, the most important subject would be Islam and the international monetary system in Liverpool. On Thursday, we have a seminar on riba from morning to evening, the whole day. And then on Friday, inshallah, we have another seminar in which we take a look at the world of Islam and its politics. Not immediate moment, but from the time of the destruction of the Khilafah to this day. What has been the issues which have affected the world of Islam? We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bless you now as you return to the Qur'an, that the Qur'an may explain to you the world in which you live. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ وَتُبْ عَلَيْنَا يَا مَوْلَانَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ آمين.
يا بيت القدس لنا أمل ستعود القدس لأمتنا ونطهر ساحتك العذراء وننشر فوقك رايتنا القدس تنادينا القدس تنادينا القدس لنا أمل ستعود القدس لأمتنا ونطهر ساحتك العذراء وننشر فوقك رايتنا ننشر فوقك رايتنا القدس تنادينا